Welcome, everybody. Great to have you with us this morning. This morning, we're going to hear from Barry Pogrund. Barry is a partner at MGI Bascorden, a chartered accountant with extensive experience in property investment, financial planning, estates and estate planning, audit, tax, consulting, and trusts. Barry generously gives of his time and expertise, and for this we are most grateful. Please pop questions in the chat box, and Barry will address them during the course of his talk and at the end. Barry, I am very intrigued to hear about the horror and the humours of wills and estates. Thank you for your time. Over to you.
Thanks very much. I appreciate it. And firstly, thank you to you, Lisa, for inviting me. I think it's the most important topic, but I think that what you guys do at ORT is just quite remarkable, and ORT in particular. I think it's a great organization, and well done to you and your team for doing what you do and in the way in which you do it. So keep going and keep strong. So this is a very, very important topic. And as Lisa has mentioned, I do quite a lot of work in the estate and will department. In fact, I'm the partner in charge of that division. And everything I'm going to tell you today, in fact, is from my personal experience. It's like true life adventures of Barry, because there's a lot that has happened over the course of the years. And I can assure you there's probably not one estate that I've handled over the years that hasn't had an issue of one form or another. So let me tell you that the will is the first and critical document. And it is absolutely vital that you spend time considering what you're going to put in the will. I tell people there are only two things that you really need to concern yourself. If you're going to have sleepless nights about what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, the two things on which you need to deliberate in terms of your will are, number one, to whom do you want to leave your earthly possessions? And in what proportions, obviously. And number two is who are going to act as your executors. And I'm going to dwell on that just for a little bit, because you must understand that it's only your will and the contents of your will that can be acted on. So I'm going to give you an example. You have a domestic servant that's been in the family for the last 40 years. The father's been dead for 10 years. Your mother now dies, and there's nothing left to the maid that's been there for 40 years. And you, the children, say, this is an injustice. I mean, this is ridiculous. The lady's given the best years of her life, and my parents have given her nothing. We need to leave her something. My mother should have left her something. Well, it's tough. If it's not in the will, it cannot be acted upon. So you need to deliberate on who do you want to leave your money to, and also you want to make sure in what proportion. So where it becomes vital is that it may not necessarily mean that every child must get equally. I've said to my children, and I'll say to my clients, that firstly, an inheritance is a bonus. It is not a right. If your parents want to do sex, drugs, and rock and roll and leave you with nothing, that's their business. If they want to travel first class and do what they want to do, that's their business. So you must understand that it is a situation whereby it is a bonus and not a right. And it's important that if you are going to leave it differently to your children, because there may be different needs for your children. There may be one that's not married very well in terms of financially being secure. There may be one that can't earn a living. There may be one that's got other financial issues. There are lots of problems in every family. As I've always said, it's a classic Afrikaans saying, elke huis het sy kruis. But if you are going to make a change, if you're not going to make it equally, because that's generally the norm, then you need to have a SONA. You need to have a State of the Nation address with the family. Because I have seen how it has been, our families have absolutely been torn asunder because of the fact that they weren't left the money equally. The father, and I was involved with the will, and I understand the logic behind what the father did, and he was absolutely right. I mean, I understand it perfectly, but it turned out that he didn't leave it equally. He didn't tell the children why he didn't leave it equally, And that created such bad blood between the two brothers that it was terrible. I'm pleased to say, having spoken to the one brother recently, that things have been patched up, but it created an enormous amount of turmoil. So you need to look at how you're going to divide up your estate. Generally speaking, it works like this, that most estates, and it's your money and you can do what you like with it, okay, is that you generally say, well, when the first one dies, I'm leaving it to the second one. When the second one dies, I'm then going to give it to the children equally. Have a nice day. And don't try and rule from the grave. Do what you need to do. So if you're going to do that sort of scenario, it's fine. And I'll go through the estate duty and rebates and all of that in a moment. But your will is a living document. So you need to look at it on a regular basis and have circumstances change. I didn't get involved with my late mother's will, unfortunately, and I wish that I had, because my sister had passed away before she had actually died, and therefore she should have changed the will, which she didn't. So it's a living document, and circumstances change. People die, people get divorced, people have immigrate, people you want to cut out of the will for whatever reason. And let me tell you, I've had a 50 million rand estate, 4 children, one never got one zack from that estate. That's how you create happy families, I must tell you, swiftly. All right. So you need to look at how you want to do it. I had a situation as well, whereby the clients tell me she wants to leave money to a friend. And when you do these sort of things, you say, well, that's fine. Let's make a codicil, and we left some money and we upped it from 10,000 to 20,000. The woman died about 11 years ago. And 20,000 rand wasn't a hell of a lot of money. But when I was cleaning out her flat, and I'll tell a little bit more about this lady later, she was a woman that had never married, no children, no family. I was the next of kin. Like we had Tuesdays with Maury, I had Thursdays with Anne, and I used to go and visit her every Thursday after she was diagnosed with cancer. And we upped it to her friend scenario from 10 to 20. And in cleaning out her flat, the friend came and said, do you mind if I take the kettle? And do you mind if I take the iron and whatever? And I said, oh my word, have I known that the woman was so badly off, I would have told this woman, please do me a favor, move the 10,000 to R1 million. It would have made no difference, but everything was left to charity. But it would have made an enormous difference in terms of that person's life. So you need to deliberate on who you want to leave your money to. And in that, it's going to be family, it's going to be friends, it's going to be charities. And some people say, well, you know, I've given in my lifetime, I'm not going to give any more. And it's your will, it's your money. And as I keep saying, you can do what you like. But I think it's always a good idea to say, well, you know, some charities is a good option. In that regard, do not leave it to the Red Cross. If you're going to leave money to the Red Cross, I'm a big fan of the Red Cross. Make no error, it's one of my pet charities. But then you've got to leave it to the Red Cross Children's Hospital Trust, not to the Red Cross. Otherwise, it goes to the province and not to the trust. So just be mindful of these nuances. But having said that, you then say, okay, fine, I'm going to leave so much to everybody, including my bequest to children, grandchildren. Don't forget about the grandchildren, because I think it's quite important that they know, okay, Granny died and she left me 10,000. She thought of me. And don't think, oh, well, I've given charity during my lifetime. My kids might give charity, because sometimes they don't have the same sort of ethos as you do. But make sure that your will is up to date in terms of your beneficiaries, because they change and your ideas might change. Your friend might have died, or you want to up it or reduce it or whatever. And then you also must understand that because it's a living document and because you can make changes, you don't have to redo a will. You just have a codicil, so that you says it's a document that says I refer to my original will and I now want to make a change. I want to up it from the charity from 10,000 rands to 20,000 rands. It's a one-page document, but your will plus the codicils are what is important. And there are protocols involved in signing that, which I'll tell you about in a moment. So once you've got all your beneficiaries sorted out, then you've got to look at your executors, and your executors are fundamental. Now, I gave this talk a few years ago to an organization, and I'm going to say what I'm going to tell you now. And I said that I wouldn't appoint an institution as my executor, particularly a bank, because I've had bad experiences with them, and they treat you as a number, and they don't treat you as a person, and they're not interested in you as a family. And I said that publicly, and he came up to me and he told me that he took umbrage to that comment. And I asked him why. I said, because he worked in the bank in the States division for 30 years. I said, well, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I must tell you, that's been my experience. I've only had bad experiences. It's a very emotional time. It's a very traumatic time. And you want somebody with whom you can work, somebody that you can trust, and somebody that understands debits and credits, because that's what it amounts to at the end of the day. I do believe that it is important to have an executor that is a family member. So, example, I would have a spouse as an executor or executrix, plus a professional advisor, like an accountant or your accountant, for example. That's what I would do. Why? Because if you don't have that, and then let's just say that you appoint Zorach as your executor without the surviving spouse, then Zorach can tell you the fee is this, which I'll tell you about later in terms of the tariff, and you have no negotiating powers because he is the guy in charge. And he can tell you, this is what I'm doing. He doesn't have to ask you. He can just tell you because he has the ultimate authority. But when you are a co-executor, then you've got to make decisions together. And therefore, you have ability to negotiate. You have ability to have your say in whatever you need to say. But when one dies, and it's not an if, I'm afraid to tell you, it's a when you die, whoever has an original will needs to lodge that with the Master of the High Court. The Master of the High Court will then look at the will, the latest will, and see that it is correctly signed, dated, that every page has been signed in full, that the witnesses are not related, that the witnesses are not inheriting, that every page is got no changes or anything. There are a whole lot of protocols that are involved in order to make sure that the will is valid. And the will and the codicil will go to the master. He will check to make sure that everything is okay. If he is happy, he will accept that will, and he will then issue what they call letters of executorship. No estate can start without letters of executorship. And therefore, with the master's office in disarray at the moment because they've been hijacked in terms of their computer systems, and they're not issuing any letters of executorship, and it could take more than 6 months now to get one. What happens to the family if they can't get money? So it's my belief that it's very important that your executor can help you out there, because if you've got money in a deceased estate, that money in the bank has to be frozen on date of death. You're not allowed to use that money. So what do you do to put challahs on the table on Friday night if you haven't got access to the cash? And therefore, it's important that both the husband and the wife should have access to money and possibly have their own money in their own banking account for just such an eventuality. But if you've got a friendly executor, then he can help you in terms of raising the cash or making something from that account. So just be mindful that that's a very important thing. But when the master then issues the letter of executorship, that's when the work begins. And with that, by the way, to get letters of executorship, it's not only the will that gets lodged, it's the list of inventory, it's the death notice, it's the acceptance of executorship, etc. And let me tell you, it's not a 5-minute affair. People say to me, why are the fees so high? Why is this? Well, there's a lot of effort. In some estates, you can make money, and some estates, you're going to lose money, because every estate has got its complexities, but it's important that you understand that it's a process that doesn't just take 5 minutes. So you lodge it with the master, he gives you the letters of executorship, you then put an advert in the paper, which is a local newspaper, which will either be the Cape Times or the Bagger or the Business Day, and the Government Gazette, to say the state is now advertising for debtors and creditors. So if you've got a claim against the estate, then you must lodge it with the executor. Then the person is now going to get hold of all the assets and going to get hold of all the liabilities. And he's going to create a document, which is an accounting document, showing all the assets, showing all the liabilities at date of death. Very important. And date of death triggers off a capital gain event. So therefore, from a tax perspective, you've got to make sure that the taxes are up to date to the end of the last February of the person dying. Then there will be a tax return at date of death, which is a capital gain event. And then your estate now needs to be registered for estate duty, for income tax as well. So there are different tax returns that need to be put in. So when you've got the liquidation distribution account and you've sorted it all out at date of death, and you're going to have post-death income and expenses, you get to a stage, maybe 6 months to a year later, where you're now ready to lodge that with the Master of the High Court. When you lodge that with the Master of the High Court, then what happens is that the Master of the High Court will say, I've got a few queries. Have you done this? What about that? Show me this voucher, because every single item in the liquidation and distribution account called the L&D account has to have a voucher attached. And there's a number next to each item. And he can call for voucher 27, voucher 47, voucher 92. And you just got to supply that to him. So everything is there. And as an executor or executrix, you have access to all of that. You need to be involved in making this process work and make sure that you understand where everything is. When the master says, fine, I'm now happy, then you put an advert again in the newspaper and again in the government gazette to say that the liquidation distribution account is available for inspection at the magistrate's court in which the person resided and at the master's office. It is a public document. You can go and have a look. I had a client of mine, that's what he used to do on a Friday, because it's a Friday morning that all the notices come out. He used to look, oh, Mrs. Pazwalski died. Let me go see what she had and who she left it to. And he had it as a pastime. He was retired and he had a good time. And he would tell me, did you know that Mrs. Pazwalski had this and she left it to this and that? And it was great. I mean, he thoroughly enjoyed himself. But be mindful that it is a public document and anybody can go and have a look at it and anybody can see, oh, they weren't as wealthy as they thought they were. As my one client used to say, I don't want to be a millionaire, I just want to live like one. But having said that, your will is a fundamental document. It needs to address your assets locally and it needs to address your assets abroad. The wills that I get involved with, I say you need to have a clause that says, this is my will, my last South African will, and I'll tell you why. My last South African will, I reject any previous wills, South African wills, and if there are assets abroad and there is no will that deals with the assets abroad, then please use this will as the will to deal with those assets. Because if I say I'm going to annul all previous wills and I've got an offshore will, then that offshore will also be annulled. So therefore you say I'm annulling all my previous South African wills. This is my will to deal with my South African estate. And if there's no will and there are assets abroad, please use this will in order to deal with my assets that are abroad. And if you itemize something, if you say, I'm leaving the grand piano to my niece, let us call her Jane, okay, then that grand piano needs to be valued. And anything that is being valued will attract estate duty and it will attract the executor's fees. So people say to me, but you know, I've got the samovar from my Boba. It doesn't have a great value, but I want to leave that to my niece Jane. Let's use niece Jane because then I don't know niece Jane, but I think it sounds good. So I'm leaving it to my niece Jane. What do I do? Because I don't want my nephew Tim to come and take it. I want to leave it to my niece Jane. So what you then do, you have what I call a letter of wishes. You say, I'm leaving the following items to the following people. I have one client, and I lie not to you. If you picked up the bottle, underneath it will tell you to which child it will go. Every item in the house is marked. And I've also had issues when they've had 3 children and they say, fine, I tell you what, let's go. Who's going to go first? Okay, let's put our names in a hat. And then whoever draws out first will go first. Okay, and it's go 1, 2, 3, and then it'll be 2, 3, 1, and then it'll be, and so we carry on. And there was such spite within the family that the person that drew the first ability to draw whatever they wanted from the ornaments and whatever of the flat took something that the other sibling desperately wanted. Again, how to create happy families in one easy lesson. This is a Happy Families 101. So if you don't want something to be listed in the will and therefore have it valued and therefore have estate duty and executive fees being attracted to it, then put it in a letter of wishes. Then you clearly know that the tea service must go to this one, the piano must go there, the samovar must go there, etc., etc. Because a lot of the time that doesn't have a value. But if you put it in the will, it will need to be there. It's quite an interesting thing, by the way, that if you don't want to die, and most people don't generally, all right, then you need to own Krugerrands. Because it's quite a remarkable thing that most people that died just never own Krugerrands. It's the most incredible thing. So if you don't want to die, just own Krugerrands. Okay, bit of humor. I'm not sure if you're getting it, but it's okay. But when you do that and you say, I've listed everything in my will, I've got my executors in place, and you need to keep looking at it because executors can go gaga or they can die. And the same can happen to you. And there is no ways that I will be involved in a client's affairs and changing a will if they've gone gaga. So I actually said to a client of mine, he had an issue with one of his children, and I said, I can change your will for you, but you need to deliberate and tell me what you want me to do. But I can only do it for you if you don't go gaga, if you don't die. And I got a call the next morning to say that he had died that night. So yeah, you need to act on it. You need to deal with it, and you must make sure that it's there. But one of the things that people say, well, what about a living will? A living will is an important document. It's what I call a get out of jail free card. I don't believe it has a legal standing, but it does give the children the ability to say, I know what mom would have wanted. She doesn't want to lie there like a vegetable. Let us switch off the machine. Let's carry on and work on regardless. Now that's fine. Some people believe it is a legal document and it does have a legal standing. I don't believe it, but I think it's a good thing for the kids to have. And I did have a client that said to me, whatever you do, do not switch off the machine. I want a living will that says you keep me going. He unfortunately died in his sleep, and so I didn't have to act on that in any way. So it's very important that you choose the right executor. And as I say, I would have somebody that's a family member, and I would also have a financial person. Do be careful if you're appointing one child and there are other children and you haven't told the other children why A is being appointed and not B, C, or D. And I've had issues on that one as well, where the client's daughter actually had to go and have psychiatric help because she wasn't chosen as an executrix, but her sister was. So please, you need to talk about it. There are probably two things that are most important to a person's life. They don't go about talking in open public. One is their sex life and one is their finances. But I understand if you're not going to talk to your children about your sex life, but I do think that there's going to be a stage where you need to talk to your children and explain to them where you've got things, where they are, how you want them dispersed, and please, no fighting. One of the clauses that I put in my wills when I draft a simple will is basically this. If anybody contests the will, they disinherit. Have a nice day. Not interested. Because that's not what it's there for. I'm not there to create issues within the family, and I'm not there to create unhappiness in any way either. So the beneficiaries are important. You've got to get all your administration together. It's very, very important to have all your documents together. I had a safe which kept all my documents. Everything was achter mekaar. And in June this year, we were burgled, and they picked up my entire safe and they took it out with every single document that I had. Okay, and I was absolutely achter mekaar with everything. My life policies, my RAs, my registration of the cars, my ketubah, my birth certificate, you name it, it was in there, and it's all gone. There's no value to the other people, but it had incredible value to me. I'm now trying to get those documents. You need to have those documents in order. If you don't have the original registration paper of your car, I'm not talking about your license that you get every year. I'm talking about your original registration paper of your motor vehicle and your trailer and your motorbike and all those things. If you don't have it, then the executor, not a family member, nobody else, the executor has to go and sit in that queue and get it. I know because I've had to do it for my car because I've lost the papers now. I've had to do it for other estates, and I go there at 7:30 in the morning only to find that the guys haven't paid their bloody licenses for the last 4 years, and there's penalties and interest. And I've got to go and draw the cash to sort it out. It's a chamors. Get your papers together, get your title deeds together, get your RAs, get your unit trust, get your passwords. Don't think that the passwords are not important. Passwords are vital. How did the family know how to access your Facebook account? And I find it quite bizarre when somebody dies and you go onto their Facebook page and you get all these messages coming into the oak. It's dead. I wish you long life, but the oak is dead. I don't understand that. And it's so impersonal too, but that's my personal belief on that. But it's important that you get the passwords. Cryptocurrency is an asset. Cryptocurrency needs to come into your will. Cryptocurrency cannot be accessed if you don't have that wallet password. I don't understand it. I don't invest it in it. My kids do. They tell me they've made quite a lot of money. I'm very happy to hear that. But the point is this, that you, without that password, wallet number, whatever it is, you cannot access your cryptocurrency account, and the money is gone forever. I had a client of mine that I was consulting on another estate in Johannesburg, and the guy was a bachelor. He was never married. A child popped out after he died that nobody knew about, and he was an alcoholic and a very entrepreneur and all the good things, and a raconteur and all those good things. And he was 80 years old, and he had a broken leg, and he took a first-class trip to Switzerland, to the Bahnhofstrasse 10 days before he died. But we have no idea where that account is, or where the money is, or anything. There's not one piece of paper telling us about that bank account. So it's like the Holocaust funds that are lying there. It's never to be accessed. Gone. It's history. And as one guy said, where's the money? Gone. History. So make sure that your documents are all there. Your ketubah, as I say, your title deeds, your registration papers, your birth certificate, whatever document you think you might need, have it. Life policies. And in terms of life policies, if you leave your beneficiary as the estate, then the money will come into the estate. It will be subject to estate duty. It will be subject to executor's fees. If you leave it to a surviving person, like a child or a spouse, it doesn't form part of your estate. Okay, very important. You need to look at that. But please understand that it's important that you have all this paperwork. The more paperwork that you have available, the easier it is to do the process. Because bank accounts have to be closed and the money transferred. That's easy. What do you do with the unit trust? That's the decision that needs to be made. But if you're leaving it all to some other executor, and the guy says to you, fine, he's got carte blanche to do what he likes. If he sells the unit trust, he sells them. You've got no right to do anything. Okay? There's nothing that you can do. But if you're part of it, you say, no, I would like to keep it. I want to share it. And also understand that you can share it amongst the family. Doesn't have to be that everybody must get the house, a share in the house, or a share in the unit trust and a share in the share portfolio. You can say, listen, we're going to divide it up, but we're all going to get equal in value. I will take the house, you will take the cash and some unit trust to make it equal. Or if I'm taking too much, the house is worth 5 million, I'm only entitled to 4 million, I will pay in R1 million in order to get the house. And that's my share of the estate. You follow? So if something you don't follow, you can wave, you can shout. I can't see, if you haven't got your video on, I can't see you waving at me, and I can't see if you're smiling or not. But if you do put your video on, or you can copy a chat, I will then have a look and say, hey, listen, there is a problem, and I will sort it out. One of the questions that was raised here is, what happens if your executor passes away before you, and you haven't changed your will? That's like dying intestate. If you don't have a will, not quite, by the way, but if you die intestate, let me tell you what that means. It means you don't have a will, or you don't have a valid will. Then the master will appoint somebody to look after your estate. You don't want that. You don't want somebody you don't know who doesn't care about you to look after your estate. And if you don't have it, then it goes what they call an interstate succession. And there's a succession act, which will tell you exactly how it needs to go. Some to the wife, some to the children. If there are no children, it goes up to the father and mother. No father, mother goes to the siblings. There's a whole tree on how to work it out. Make sure you've got a valid will. But if your executor should pass away before you do, and you haven't changed your will, then you've got a badly drawn will. Why do I say that? Because in the wills that I will look after, I say like this: I'm going to have the surviving spouse, whose name I've already mentioned. I'm going to have, let's just say Barry. But if Barry is not there for whatever reason, then a partner at the practice will look after you. So I've catered for that. So it's very, very important that you actually deal with it and make sure that your executors are there. Now, it will needs to be clearly defined as well. You can't say, for example, I leave it to my wife. Because when you drafted the will, you were married to wife 1. When you die, you're married to wife 2. Now, which wife are you leaving it to? So you need to be clear, and you need to have this updated on a regular basis. It's a living document. You need to deal with it. Some of the other things I want to tell you: fur coats, mink stoles, leopard skin coats, anything of that nature, you can pick it up and you can throw it in the bin. It has zero value. Clothing, all of that, zero value. Furniture and effects, probably next to nothing. Because a lot of people, you try and sell second-hand furniture. You want to buy it, it costs the earth. You want to sell it with kadogas. And when it comes to an estate, now let's go back to the liquidation and distribution account. We've listed all the assets, we've got all the liabilities, we've got a net estate of, let's say, I'm going to use two examples. The one example is 5 million, the other example is 10 million. If you are the first dying spouse and you leave everything either A, to your surviving spouse, or B, in a trust where the surviving spouse is 100% beneficiary, no other beneficiary until after the spouse dies, then there will be no executive, there will be no estate duty on the first dying. So if you leave all your money to a surviving spouse in trust or directly, no estate duty to be paid. When the second spouse dies, the surviving spouse dies, then there will be estate duty to be paid. So now let's take the first example. The husband and wife, A and B. I'm not sure who's going to go first. They say men generally go first because they want to. I'm not sure. But anyway, the point is this, that what happens is that we have two scenarios, A and B. I'm not sure who's A, if A is Mr. or Mrs., doesn't matter. But A is worth 5 million, B is worth 6 million. Let's use that example. When A dies and he leaves everything to B, no estate duty. B now has an estate of 11 million rand, the 6 and the 5. B then dies. They say there's no increase in the value. When eventually B dies, there's 11 million rand left. Because A didn't use his 3.5 million rand rebate, because the first 3.5 million rand is not subject to estate duty, then whatever he hasn't used is added onto the 3.5 million of the surviving spouse. So the surviving spouse effectively is entitled to the 7 million, which is 3.5 plus 3.5, less whatever the first dying used. So in this case, dying A used nothing. Dying B, he's got 11 minus 7. He's got a 4 million rand dutiable estate. Because it's less than 20 million, it'll only have to pay tax at 20%. So there's a case where he's now going to pay a lot of money because that's 800,000 rands in estate duty. And I said, where does the money come from? And now that's when you got to work with the executive and say, well, I don't want to sell the house and I don't want to do this. Let's sell the car, or let's sell some of the unit trust. Which unit trust should we sell? Which shares should we sell? Or that's where it becomes so important. But it's a 20% estate duty that you'll then have to pay. Understand also that it's very important that you make sure that everything is clearly defined. And if you've got overseas beneficiaries, that's also another issue. From the 1st of March this year, they changed the rules. There was you no longer have to formally emigrate in terms of an MP336. If somebody did, that would be fantastic, because in inheritance, no matter what the quantum, can flow abroad if you have formally emigrated. Now they've changed it. It's not so much the South African Reserve Bank, it's more South African Revenue Services. The system has changed. But if your relative who's going to inherit has a South African barcoded ID, you tell him to make sure that he keeps that locked up and safe, because that is going to be critical in making the money flow abroad going forward. Make it a lot easier. So one of the stories that I want to tell you is that we had a situation whereby this client that I told you that I would tell you about later, she, as I said, never married, no children. I was her next of kin, and I would go and visit her every Thursday. And in fact, the one Saturday night, I got a message after Shabbos on the phone to say, please, can I bring a bedpan and a wheelchair, because she's not in great shape. And I said to my wife, we're meant to be going out for dinner. I said, listen, we're stopping at Weinberg Pharmacy. We've got to go buy a bedpan and get a wheelchair. And she's like, what's wrong with you? I said, no, we've got to go deliver it on our way, which is what we duly did. Okay. And when she died, she left me her candlesticks, which are beautiful, and I still use them. I sorted them out, had them resilvered and everything, and they are absolutely magnificent. But she left an estate of 40 million rand, and I sometimes think to myself, you know what? She should have kept the candlesticks and left me the 40 million. That would have been nice. Okay. But I will say this much, that it's fantastic because all that money is going to charity, and we have run that estate now for 11 years, and we have given over 20 million rand away, and we still have assets to go. We've got about 9 years to go of giving this money away. And it's just fantastic to be able to keep a name alive like this. So, and interesting enough, so Jewish women, 50% to Jewish charities and 50% to non-Jewish charities. And it's fantastic. It's just nice to keep a name alive. People ask me, what about the joint wills? Is it a good idea to have a joint will? I say, no, I'm not a lover of a joint will because A, you may have different ideas. I love my wife dearly, but she wants to leave certain things to certain family members, and I want to leave my things to certain family members. Sometimes we correlate, sometimes we don't. It's her money, she can do what she likes. It's my money, I can do what the hell I like. But when you get a joint will, you've got no, it's like whatever you're doing together. And when you lodge that joint will with the master, which is the original document, and now the second one dies, now you can't find the will because and the master's in disarray. I don't like joint wills. Please just have a separate will for each of you. And then, if you're leaving money to any of the beneficiaries, make sure you know where they are. Give me the ID numbers, give me their addresses. Because if you can't find them, then the money is to go into the Guardians Fund. The Guardians Fund is sitting with billions of rand. There are people that trawl through those names, and then they'll phone you and they'll say, hi, Mervyn, if I find you money, can I take 30% of it? So, well, you can find me money, you can have 30% with pleasure because I'm getting nothing. And they say, are you Mervyn, and or do you live here, and were you there? Yes, I am. They go to the Guardians Fund, you get your money, you pay the guy 30%, and that's how he makes a living. There's billions and billions of rands sitting in that Guardians Fund because they can't find the beneficiaries. A couple of other points I want to raise. I see my time I've got another 5 minutes. I want to raise to a couple of queries here that have come up over the years, and I just want to tell you about them. In the will, I say no collation between siblings. What does that mean? The collation clause means that if I've given it, my late mother would have said, with a beating heart and warm hands to my children during my lifetime, I've given to them whatever I've given, and they do not have to make a reckoning when I die. What I've given, I've given. They don't have to true up. They don't have to say, well, you got 100,000 rands more than I did, and therefore you must make it good. If I gave more to one child than another child, that's my decision. They don't have to come and try and make it equal. If you question what age should the people inherit, that's a fundamental. That depends on your children. And don't forget, it can happen like with my late sister, that she was going to inherit, but she died. Now it goes to her children, but her children are much younger. Do you want to give kids that age the money? Do you want to give your own kids the money when they're 21? And people say, but at 21, I know what I was like at 21. Well, are your kids as street smart as you were when you were 21? And I'm prepared to bet you all my bar mitzvah money that they are not as street smart as you were. I guarantee you that. So the question is, do you then say, okay, if 21 would have been a good age, because at 22 you're probably married. I mean, my wife was 22, I was 26. We were young, but we were we seemed to be more advanced in years, I'll be honest with you. So is it 21? Is it 25? Is it 30? I unfortunately had a client who died when he was 96, although his birth certificate said he was 100, but I think they were wrong. The family told me that they were wrong, not that I could go and age him. But they only inherited when they were in their 60s because the old man lived and he was tight-fisted. He never gave them anything and he owned blocks of flats. Okay, so the point is that you don't know when you're going to inherit, but 35 may be a bit old. Maybe they can't handle their money. And if people can't handle their money, or they're subject to litigation, or they're going to be sued, or there's a problem in the marriage, whatever, you may want to say, well, you know what, I'm going to leave it in a trust for them so that they can't access the capital, but they can get the income and they can get capital with the consent of the trustees. So nobody can lay their grubby paws on the money when it should be there for long term. So as my late partner used to say, you go from clogs to clogs in 3 generations. That's what he kept on telling me. From clogs to clogs in 3 generations. They come here with nothing. The children do well, the grandchildren suffer. That's how it works. Okay. But very important that you sort that out, and that you make sure that your kids will know that they're not going to inherit when they're 25. So I tell my kids, firstly, if you kill somebody, you can't inherit. So the younger affair, the guys there, why can't I think of them? From Badar, the Badar murder, where he killed the mother and father, and he didn't do a good job on his sister. All right, he doesn't inherit anything because he was the guy that perpetrated it. So you can't inherit if you kill the person. So I tell my kids it doesn't help. Okay, they got to do smart that they got to do, and then it first goes to my wife and then it goes to them. So they've got to be really smart to do a double murder and get away with it. And then they still don't get it until the age of 30. So they're not in for a good time just yet. But what I want to also add onto that is that the fees, and I said I would raise the fees. So the master lays down a tariff which says it's 3.5% on the gross assets, not the net assets, on the gross assets. It's 3.5% and it's 6% on post-death income. That's, and plus VAT. So now you are not an executrix or an executor. Your financial person is. Your financial person then says, I'm charging you full fees. You have no say. You have got no way of negotiating because you really have got no locus standi unless you've got somebody that you can talk to and deal with and be part of it. So you need to have somebody as an executor that understands. You need to be an executor or an executrix, and you need to negotiate the fees. Very important. They are negotiable, depending on how big their estate is, depending on the complexities of their estate. We raised the fee the other day of 1.1 million rand estate, which is a fantastic fee. But the cost to get to that, you'll be most surprised that it's like in the stratosphere. There were complications here and there. You do sometimes get an estate. For example, the woman's got 10 million rand and it's in a bank account. That's easy. I would feel very uncomfortable to charge 3.5% to do one bank account, and it takes very little effort. So look at the fees, look to see what you can do, look to make sure that you work with the right people. So in summary, let me tell you, before I open it up for questions, make sure that you have a valid will, that your codicil is there, that it's all in place. You have a letter of wishes, you possibly have a living will. You make sure you've got a will for people that are abroad. You have all your documentation in place. You make sure that your beneficiaries understand why you're doing what you're doing, and that you have chosen the right people to be your executors. Most important, the executors is a fundamental question in which you need to deliberate and you need to make decisions on. I'm happy to carry on about other stories I could possibly tell you, but I see my time is where it needs to be in terms of the 40 minutes, and I'm happy to take any questions that you would like to ask me. Open the floor.
Thanks, Barry. Questions come through. Please explain what excuse my ignorance, I don't know how to pronounce it, stirpers mean.
With pleasure. No, that is correct. Okay, so what happens is this, and it's a good question, because you can disinherit. You can say you can renounce your inheritance, right? So let me give you an example. Last parent dies and they leave the money to their children. Let's just take, equally. Let's just make it simple. So you've got son and daughter, just to draw a diagram in your mind. And the son has passed away before the parent. Then what we say is that his share will go to his representatives per stirpes. So his share will go to his children. So let's say he's got 2 children, then each child will inherit a quarter each, and the other sibling will then inherit the 50%. So per stirpes means per line. It's down the line. So it will be 50-50. The one person's died, it goes to their 2 children. The other person gets their 50%. If there are no children, generally the world that I would draw up would say, this person's died, and there are no children, then his share will go to the remaining child. Okay, then they would inherit 100%. Now, if you say, listen, I've made it big. I've sold out for millions and millions, and I've got so much money, I don't know how to spend it. Don't give me any more money. I don't want it. Then it will, you renounce it because you want to give it to your sibling who needs the money. You can't do that unless all the other underlying people also renounce their inheritance. Because if I say I don't want it, then it automatically goes to my children. But then my children will have to say they don't want it either, and then it can pass over to the remaining siblings. Does that answer your question? Whoever answered, it's a good question. Per stirpes means per line, down the line.
So Barry, if the one sibling doesn't have children, I think you covered that, but just repeat that. So are you with me? So if the one, if the one beneficiary doesn't have children but has a spouse, but doesn't have children, then the fifth, and it's left to the two children. Are you with me? Am I making sense?
So what you're saying, if I understand your question correctly, Elaine, last parent dies, two children, okay, child.
Correct.
One child has died, leaving a spouse and no children.
Yes.
But the will says, I'm leaving it to this child, okay? But he's dead. Doesn't go to the wife. Doesn't go to the wife. It will go to his children. Unless the will says that if he dies, I'm giving it to his wife, if he's still married. Depends what the will says. If it's not in the will, she doesn't get. Have a nice day. Hard luck.
So the per stirpes. So if the child that does have children passes away, then per stirpes means that it will go to the children equally.
Correct.
Okay, but I'm not understanding the beneficiary that doesn't have children, doesn't go to his wife.
Then it will go to the remaining child. You know, it's his sibling.
Got it. Okay, got it.
Okay.
I got it. Thanks, Barry. Okay. All right.
So Howard, your question there, unfortunately, she passed away tragically without leaving a will. And let me just tell you that that's a sad scenario because we've got the time to do it. I say to people, don't tell me you haven't had time. Don't tell me you haven't had time. You must find the time to deal with certain things. And this is something that you need to deal with. Don't think you don't have an estate. We all have an estate in one form or another. So what happens is that the master will ask you to provide security. In the wills that I draft, I say, I don't need to survive. You don't have to. If you don't have that clause, the master may say, please take out security in handling the will. Why does they say that? Because you're in a position, a fiduciary position. You're taking control of a whole lot of assets, and you need to make sure that they distribute it to the right people. What happens if you're not a good guy? And what happens if you run away with all the assets? What are the family going to do? So you take out an insurance policy, which is a fidelity insurance, which is seriously expensive because it's cash. It's like holding cash. For what purpose? So what happens is that you then have a situation whereby you've got to take out security to handle the estate. Your question now is slightly different. She's died without a will, which is tragic that she died firstly. Also tragic that she doesn't have a will. And she's got to provide, and it's told that he, I don't know who he is, but must be the executor, has to provide security for their minor child. Yes, because if the will doesn't say that you don't have to provide security, that's fine, but you don't have a will. The master has the right to say, you're getting all this cash. How do I know that you're going to look after it properly and that when the minor grows up, that the money's still there for him? So he has that right to do that. And it's a horrible one because it's expensive. It's an expensive story. Okay.
Barry, thanks for that. A question has come through. I'm going to answer. If a couple has a couple has a joint bank account or equities account in the name of both spouses, should the will have a clause to bequeath the account to the surviving spouse? Will the account be frozen? And if yes, can the bequest clause prevent it from being frozen?
Okay. there were three parts to that. So the first part is that the joint account, right? It's in a joint account and it will be frozen. The fact that you've got a bequest in the will to say it's going to go to that person is irrelevant. It's going to be frozen and they can't access it. So just go through those three again, if you don't mind. I don't think I answered number 2. So just go through those three again. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'll pop it in the chat box.
Do that.
So that
while you do that, let me
easy.
just answer Brent's question. When you die,
Okay.
as I said, it's a capital gain event. If there's a transfer of a property, then there are no transfer fees to be paid, but there will be conveyancing fees and other legal charges, but there's no transfer duty. If you sell the property, in other words, you're not transferring the property in terms of the inheritance, but you're now selling the property, then there will be transfer duty to be paid, but that will be paid by the purchaser. Okay, so thank you for that, Lisa. Let me answer that. The joint bank account and equity account in name of both spouses, that already is a problem. And oh, by the way, it depends also how they married. If you married in community of property, then everything you own is half-half. Okay, no matter whose name it's registered in, it actually doesn't really matter. Just be mindful of that. So if they've got it in their both names, it's both of theirs. Should they have a clause bequeathed to the surviving spouse? That's up to them. That's in terms of how you want to deal with your will. You may say, I'm leaving all my shares to my wife. I'm leaving all my shares to my children. Depends what you want to do in your will. You don't have to leave it to your surviving spouse. You, as I say, you need to look at the documentation and look at the will to who you want to leave it to. And will the account be frozen? It will be frozen. Again, that's why I say you need to make sure that you've got money in each person's bank account so that when the eventuality does happen, they've got access to some sort of money. Okay, so Doris, it's a good question that you speak about trust. So the question here is, that I speak about setting up a trust. Why would I set up a trust? Well, let me just talk about the different types of trust. The two main type of trust are an inter vivos trust, meaning inter vivos during your lifetime, which is what people create now, and they put assets into their estate now, into their trust now. Why do they do that? Because any incremental value will be arrested in terms of their estate, because the only thing they have to account for is a loan account if there is anything, and there's asset protection, and you can disseminate and distribute the income amongst a whole lot of different beneficiaries. They're all good reasons to have a trust. There's sometimes good reasons not to have it, but that's an inter vivos trust. A testamentary trust is a trust that is created from the will, and there are no changes that can be made. If that will trust says that I'm leaving it to a will trust called the Niece Jane Trust, and all the income must go to Zurich, that is how it will be. You can't say, well, Zurich is a naughty boy and I'm not giving him the income. You've got no chance to changing it. That's what the will says. That's what you have to do. So why would we create a trust? Now let's look at two different scenarios. There are three different scenarios, actually. The first is if I'm leaving it to a surviving spouse, but I don't want her to have the money in her own name because A, she's going to find some toy boy that's going to look after, take all her money and leave it for nothing. Or she might be my second wife, and I don't want her to go and give it to her children and not to my children, because she can change her will and disinherit my kids. Or she doesn't have the wherewithal to handle money, and I want to protect her, okay? Or I don't want her to be able to just do whatever she wants to do. Okay, so there are a lot of good reasons why you want to put in trust for a spouse. There are. Or you can say, you know what? Do what the hell you like. I'm dead and do what you like. Okay. That's the one. The second one is you create the trust because the child, for example, can't handle money. They either are mentally retarded, or they are financially retarded, or they just are no good nicks. They couldn't be involved in sex, drugs, rock and roll. They just got no damn clue. And you know that if you give it to them on day one, on day two, they're going to come knocking on your door. And I've had that situation. And I've told the client to their face in front of their sibling, I'm telling you, here's your money. And we disbanded the trust because this guy was a problem for me and the family. And I said, when you use your money, You're going to come knocking on the door, but there's nobody going to be home. I'm telling you now, there's nobody going to be home. So you want to protect that and rather have it in trust. I know that that money is going to go. I can, again, I'm going to lose all my bar mitzvah money again, but I think I'm safe on that one too. So you have a trust for a child that can't handle money. And then the third types of scenario is when, for example, you're leaving it to a child and that child's deceased, but now their children are going to inherit, but their children are 5 and 7. I mean, take my sister, as you know, Doris. I mean, the kids there, they're not going to be able to handle it necessarily. They were well looked after, that was fine. But you may want to say, but kids are not going to take the money at 5 and 7. Who's going to look after it? It's the same question, Howard, that you were, it was Howard, wasn't it? I think that asked the question in terms of how do I deal with it in terms of the security and looking after it. There you created in a trust, which says when you get to the age of 21, 25, 30, then you can have your money. It's not saying that they can't have the income. It's not saying they can't have capital. If they need to have braces and they've got enough income, the trustees can release capital to look after them. If the wording of the will says they can. If the wording of the will says they cannot get access to capital, then they cannot get access to capital. So your wording of your will is fundamental. It's a critical document that needs to be looked at on a regular basis. Anything else? But that was a good question. Oh, sorry, I didn't answer your other question, Doris. I apologize. What is the cost of setting up a trust? Generally speaking, the inter vivos trust is a different cost because that's a different cost. But that's not, I mean, I know our firm, I think it's about 5,000 rands or something to set up an inter vivos trust. And setting up a testamentary trust, it's automatically set up. But you've got to now register it with the master and get all the documentation and get the beneficiaries and all of that. So, but that's not a major cost at all. There's no trust deed that needs to be written. Your document, your Bible, and how to manage that trust is in fact your will. Whereas in an inter vivos trust, your document is your trust deed, which can be changed if it says it can be changed. I've had to go to the Master of the High Court now on a few occasions to change the trust deed in order to make changes because they didn't allow changes to be made. And it said in the last dying, the trust has to terminate. And I didn't want the trust to terminate because I wanted to protect the family. It's an estate duty exercise. And if it had to terminate, it will have a huge capital gain issue in it. Anything else for me? I'm happy to take the questions. Honestly, I'm here for you. As I say, ORT is a great organization, and I'm happy to be of service. Like
Thank you, Barry. Thank you.
So vamos.
A brilliant session. Such insight, such value. You really gave us so much detail, and I know what I'm going to be talking to Dean about tonight over dinner, can I assure you, and my children. So from my side, from ORT, once again, thanks for everything. You are incredible to ORT, to our community, and to South Africa and your clients. So thank you so much for everything. I really do appreciate it. And thanks to everyone for joining us this morning.
One more thing, if I may. One more thing, if I may. What happened to Nikki? Is she gone? No, she's still there. Okay. Nikki has produced a book. Okay. And basically, the book is this book here. All right. Life in a Nutshell. And this is produced by Nikki herself. And in this book here, you've got how to consolidate all your documents, what to think, your doctors, your dentists, your vet, she's listed it all in here. It is available at P&A, if I'm not mistaken. And it's a great read, but you need to fill it in. There's homework to be done before you're dead or before you gaga. So speak to Nikki. I'm sure she can help you in terms of organizing and getting the books as well.
That's amazing, Barry. Absolutely. We should all be. Nikki, I'm going to buy one. I'm coming past your house later today. So I think we should all buy one of Nikki's books and give it to our families and clients as gifts. So thank you for that, Barry. I really appreciate it. Thanks, everybody. Keep well, keep safe, and look forward to seeing you all soon.
And if I may just add one more thing, Lisa, if anybody else has got any questions, they are more than free just to send me an email.